Okay, we're live. So hello everyone who's joining us tonight for our live stream. And for those of you who are joining us later, catching up on this after probably a very hectic and busy week, welcome to our Action Learning live stream. The title of today is Navigating the Noise, Seasonal Action Learning Insights. And the focus today is just an end of year reflection, very light touch, and really bringing you into our world for action learning. So I'm delighted to be joined tonight by Eric Sanderlands, who is, Eric, maybe just say a bit about you and what brings you here and where you're joining us from tonight.
Hey, thank you, Shell. Yeah, it's nice to be beaming into London from Riyadh this evening. So yeah, maybe slightly different weather, etc., and slightly different festivities levels here. But yeah, no, I'm delighted to join Hale and Richard in No Can Will Do as regional director for the Middle East this year, which is an exciting project and gets me firmly embedded in my first love of action learning and back in touch with kind of old friends and in touch with new friends, really, in trying to create the kind of communities we want to build and expand the footprint and expand the impact of the great work of No Can Will Do and, you know, in the action learning community. So yeah, that's me, Shell.
Thanks, and it's great to have you with us. And I'm conscious that the time is quite different. You know, we're about to join our revelries with the wider No Can Will Do team. It's a shame you're not here with us tonight, but there we go. You're here with us virtually. And Richard and I are here. Well, we're in the Strand Palace tonight. So we've been in the RSA today. It's very buzzy. There's a bit of a crowd forming in the Royal Society. We'll be back there soon, and some of our network are gathering for drinks later. But we've come across the Strand Palace where it's a little bit quieter and we've got some decent Wi-Fi. And it's good to see Richard. We've been doing a lot of virtual work the last week, but it's good to be in the same room again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been some exciting stuff. We'll give some updates over the next half hour or so. But yes, there's nothing better than actually sort of meeting people and meeting some of our own network as well this evening. And, you know, for a long time thought that we're about developing a community, you know, call it a community of practice or whatever, but in relation to the key values behind action learning.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, great. Well, let's kick off because we've got 45 minutes. And this is really all about a review of the year, a year that's been, I call it the year that's killed BAU, business as usual. So we're going to spend a lot of time sort of reviewing the year and talking about how action learning plays a part in the year we've had. And also how you can, you know, if you're someone listening in now and is thinking, well, you know, this is interesting, but I've got no idea what action learning is, how you can use action learning in your day-to-day life and work to make things work better. So my first question to both of you is, what's your review of 2025? Maybe we can start with Eric.
Hey, thanks, Shell. Yeah, no, it's a big question. I've been giving it a lot of thought since you kindly just tipped me off that I should think about it. I was writing a piece that came out today on social value, and I embedded in the construction industry for a lot of my time working on kind of, you know, large scale urban developments and kind of global infrastructure and so on, or national infrastructure. And in the social values space, it's a slightly mixed picture, but it's mainly positive, I think, particularly around some of the schemes around London, the Southeast, etc., in the UK, where, you know, there is a real difference. I mean, beyond just sort of apprentices, etc., coming on and so forth, there is a real environmental impact taking place in some of the social value initiatives, some of the community things. And action learning plays a part in that, in a lot of the social value work that I've been involved in really looking at the question of investments for and who benefits and why and how can communities not be engaged, but feel some ownership and some agency in in improving their lives, etc. through these kind of investments. So there's quite a lot happening in the social value space this year. I've been just starting my review of social capital books, to be honest. Looking at the bonds that bind us. How do we create communities where people thrive and this notion of social capital, where people feel connected, feel a sense of place, feel a sense of agency, feel a sense of value, etc., know their neighbours and so on. So again, action learning, I know through the Alpha program too, has played a big part in that whole social capital piece, particularly things like fragile neighbourhoods where kind of life has broken down, there's problems with unemployment and drugs and crime and different things. Action learning has made a tremendous impact. Graduates are really leading, the field in that space. So there's been quite a lot of good stuff published in the social capital space this year, reflecting some of this work. Coming for myself, the big news is becoming regional director for No Can Will Do. Reconnecting with Richard. Well, we've always connected with Richard. We've got some history which will come up, and having Shell I've got to know very well in recent times. So having Shell out in Riyadh with us, meeting people, talking to people across the country in Saudi, and hopefully some good things starting to bubble and come up. Some of which we will talk about. So yeah, that's been really good for me and energizing, really, to see the progress of the action learning questions methodology. I think Richard thinks it's 25 years ago, and I think it's 30 years ago, but somewhere around that, I remember the genesis of it with Richard's doctorate and other things.
That's right. Yeah. Good for you remembering that, Eric. I mean, it was shortly
Happy
after
days,
the completion of the doctorate, which was into studying learning relationships like coaching and mentoring and action learning, and that led to the formation of the action learning question method, which is the version of action learning that we've been promoting for all of that time since, and we've been taking it into lots of different sectors. Government sector, we're now taking it into the defence and military sector, supporting veterans and service leavers. So it's another kind of whole sort of avenue that's opened up. What I love, Eric, and the work that you do is very kind of societal, and I think your question, Shell, about what is action learning, it's kind of what you want it to be. So really using action learning thinking and methodologies and values in order to make an impact and understand things at a societal level, at a social level. So for me, that's a lot of those are kind of meta action learning questions, which is great. A number of other people in our network are working at that sort of level. I'm also, I guess, in reflecting on the year, thinking about the work that we've done and the contribution who supported our programs, which have quite often been at right down to the individual level. So quite a lot of people, there's a lot of anxiety out there at the moment around jobs, around security, around the unknown, around the political climate, the economic climate, and anxiety is kind of really infectious. And I think we've got away with action learning and the method and the action learning facilitator program of helping people to pivot their career or to understand their own strengths, and to use that as the basis for kind of managing their kind of future. So at an individual level, you're working at a societal level, and there's a whole lot of sort of area in between, which is organizational, teams, business, public service, etc.
Yeah, and that's brilliant.
And it's one person at a time. Sorry, Shell, it's one person at a time as well, isn't it? Whatever the level, it's one person at a time, making a difference to action learning, which cumulatively changes society or changes the organization. Sorry, Shell, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all, not at all. I mean, it was a great kind of reflection on the year, and I would say, an absolute highlight for me was coming out to KSA and being part of that community and feeling very warmly welcomed, really, and having action learning warmly welcomed out there was a bit of a revelation. So really exciting times. So it brings me to the next question for you both, and I'm going to start with Richard on that, which is, how does action learning, you kind of touched on this already, but how does action learning strengthen decision making at those moments you mentioned fear and kind of uncertainty? How do you think it strengthens decision making in unstable conditions and times like these?
Well, yeah, good question. I mean, I think action learning is for that sort of situation. It has always been for working with the unknown, working with uncertainty, going right back to, the institute that we worked with. Eric was originally had Reg Evans as the inaugural president there, and he, was the, if you like, the founding father of action learning, and it was always starting with a real problem or a real challenge, whether that was a business or a national or an organizational or a social challenge. That's what it started with. It didn't start with a training course or predetermined content that people had to kind of learn and then try and find somewhere where they could apply it. It starts with real messy challenges. And yes, we may be in unstable conditions. What you do with action learning is you make that lack of stability the subject of your question. You don't think that there is a kind of normal, stable situation ever. You work on the basis, this is the current reality. That becomes the subject. And what we've got is the scaffold around that of the action learning question methodology, where people come together in groups. And that has a kind of social benefit, I think, as well, in that, people are working with their squad, if you like, of like-minded people from diverse backgrounds who are all interested in helping each other. And for me, that's what we need at the moment.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people thinking that the solutions are going to come from, AI will tell us the answers. Well, the humans put the kind of stuff into AI in the first place. So it's usually producing stuff which is actually based on pre-existing knowledge. So it has a part to play, but it's in the action learning model, it's the programmed knowledge bit that it works with. What we as humans work on is the unknown and the questions, and take a problem that's messy, bring it to your group or your learning set or your squad, and ask questions with each other around what is the problem? How do you see it? How do I see it? Who cares about it? Where are they? Let's go and talk to them. What can we now do about it? And you start with action. You don't start with theory. The theory always follows the action.
And you're not alone with the problem. Oh, sorry, Shelby.
It's all right.
Again, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. It's no, I was just thinking about my experience of action learning this year in my own set, in my own squad. And I've had a couple of moments this year where I think the two words fragility and messy kind of come out. And where I've really genuinely brought something to my set that I'm a bit, where do I go next? And I've every time felt safe to share, and I've felt there's been greater insight as a result. So it just is a lived experience. It's been amazing. Sorry, Eric, go for it.
Oh, it's my fault. I was just going to say, you're not alone with your problem is the set, isn't it? And and credit to the ALQ method, which has lasted really, because there've been a number of approaches to action learning, and it's kind of requisite structure almost, isn't it? It's like just enough structure, but light touch, so it doesn't kill the uncertainty and the curiosity and the intrigue and the future and the unknown, really. And two thoughts. We'd Reg Evans, not Donald Rumsfeld, because the known knowns, the unknown unknowns is quite profound as well, isn't it? He's maybe a more controversial figure, but we operate in a space of known unknowns and unknown unknowns in this uncertainty that we face. And just the other thought, Shell, as well, was when we're talking about change management and the kind of models and the current state and the transition state and the future state that we believe where we'll perform better. And in the transition state, there is confusion and ambiguity and uncertainty and emotion and fear too, as Richard said, and anxiety, etc. While we hope for something better. But in uncertain times, we're kind of in that transition state quite a lot of the time, with an ALQ route towards this future state that we're creating. But the good news in all of these transitions that there have always been new jobs, there have always been new opportunities. They're always different from you know, what went before. There is always the ability to, you know, self-actualize or whatever, or do well, if you can kind of figure out, isn't it, where you think things are going and what value you believe you can add, that you would enjoy doing, you know, and get paid for. So, you know, I guess, yeah, that's kind of where this feels like it fits, isn't it? But I think that ALQ route through is very powerful.
I think it is, and I think it's very now, to be honest. You know, I talk about it as the year that killed BAU. I think business as usual has been dying for years, but I do think this is the year where we as human beings have been confronted by that on every level. So, you know, the next question was about, you know, what are the lessons learned from a year of instability? And I'll kick off with a couple of points that I've noticed. The first one is the pervasiveness of AI. You know, there have been a lot of think tanks that have been jacked up over the last year around that. But what we found embedding AI in our products is there are a lot less people who have got the practical experience of navigating AI for real and maximizing it. And yet, you know, it's a global force now. It's a global force for change that we can't control as much as we may want to. There's the vector of climate change and the fact that we cannot not look at that now. It's unignorable. You know, we had the climate emergency briefing this year, or very recently actually, in the UK. So that is shape-shifting global politics, you know, geopolitically. We've also got sort of digital transformation as a whole. So beyond AI, you know, we're in a space where digital transformation is driving the whole socio-technical system. And where are we as humans in that space is a question I ask. And then there's a range of different market forces evolution. So as people are focused more post-COVID on, you know, how do I sustain myself in this world? I think there's a generational aspect to that. And, you know, people are interacting with the market differently to the way they used to. Low buying confidence, more of an interest on kind of, you know, how do you, you know, how do you look after self first? I think as well, there's a sort of market aspect of that. And then there's the, you know, having been out in KSA, Eric, you know, the amazing kind of progression of sort of, you know, just the social energy and kind of entrepreneurship, if I could, you know, for want of a better word, that I felt out there. There was a real sense of like aspiration, kind of, you know, business. There was a real business sense out there, and I felt really energized by it. And then I came back to the UK and felt that perhaps we're facing one of the most complex times we ever have in our market. So that was an amazing revelation to me.
That's great to hear, Shell. I mean, I first went out to Saudi probably about 30 years ago, and I was talking about trying to run a mini MBA within a week, you know, because that's what they wanted, everything that could be done in a week. And I kind of talked about action learning and tried to use a bit of action learning with the group. But I think I kind of realized back then that it probably wasn't the right time for action learning to take hold, but really feels like it now is. And, you know, hearing about your trip, seeing you out there and what you've done and what you've been doing, Eric, it's remarkable in terms of, you know, initially I've been hearing about this social change and a little bit cynical as to, well, is it really happening? It clearly really is happening. Yeah. And so maybe now is the time for this sort of method to complement all the other stuff that is important in terms of, you know, the taught knowledge and having the specific professional skills, but to also, you know, have action learning as a way of tackling and leaning into a lot of those big social change agendas. And it's, you know, it's fascinating where a nation actually has, you know, its vision, and amongst the vision, you have a number of key objectives. Yeah. You know, it kind of focuses the mind,
Yeah. And Eric, what are you thinking about this? Because obviously you've been in the region for some time, a lot longer than we have. What are your reflections on that?
Yeah, so you touched on some big themes there, Shell, which was just great. Actually, got me thinking. And the Saudi Arabian and regional context first. I mean, I think what's excited me really is the empowerment of women, which you know, when I was first coming out working in oil and gas, in honesty, behind compounds, you know, we some great Saudi women working on our teams. But outside of the compound, it would have been a very segregated world, and that went on for quite a while as women entered the workplace. But now, I mean, I set KPIs to get to 50% female employment. You know, and also my community development work was linked to a strategic KPI, and we got up to 37% very, very quickly, and then I don't know quite where it moved to from there, but it has to get there, you know, by 2030. So that's really good. But there's quite a hunger among, not everyone, but among the kind of more entrepreneurial and pioneering women. And of course, like as you know, Shell was doing a lot of community-based work on, you know, mentoring circles and action learning, energy amongst female micro entrepreneurs in Alula up in the mountains. And so, yeah, the chance to whether we can announce it right now, but the chance to launch Orbit as a female empowerment, well, not platform, but experience would be the word, or coming together. But yeah, empowering women through action learning to support each other, grow themselves, grow their businesses with no can will do's kind of know-how behind a great female leader in Alula, in Sarah, who will lead us off. And a model that I think we believe is transportable to communities, you know, almost anywhere really, but particularly in this region with, you know, women driving the agenda forward in so many ways right now. I think it's just very, very exciting. Yeah,
it really is, and I think that's one of the things, reflecting back on my time with you, was just the sense of like energy in the women. And being being met with that energy by the women. You know, I remember going for a walk. I think I went up to see Kingdom Tower, one of the sort of the day we had a bit of downtime, and there were a lot of women gathering and having really good conversations about their businesses and stuff. And I, you know, just calling out Sarah and what she's doing, and also Reem, who I've been lucky enough to meet. You know, really entrepreneurial spirit, loads of energy, amazing. And it's just great to have that, you know, beyond borders. You're just seeing the same kind of sense of energy, empowerment, readiness to get stuff done. So really excited for Orbit and kind of what we can do in that space collectively, and see where that goes this coming year. Okay, I'm conscious of time. I want to sort of move us forward for those who are sort of, and welcome if anyone's joining us sort of midway through after a busy, hectic day and a hectic week before the winter break. Yeah, we're joining you from KSA in London separately, and we're just about to move into the sort of second half of the stream and talk a little bit more about sort of action learning specifically and what it is. So I'm going to come to Richard next, if that's all right. Sure. So reflecting really on leadership in action learning. So what do you think is the role of leadership and collaboration in action learning during times like these sort of turbulent times we're living in?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, and I think there is a big challenge for leaders at the moment. And I see it as this. It's actually admitting as a leader that you don't have the answers. For me, that is the biggest challenge. And it takes something, particularly if in your conditioning and your training and your career and your professional development, if you've, you know, believed and other people believe that you have the answers and that's why you're in the position that you're in as a leader, that's kind of all under threat now, because of the rate of change means that, you know, yesterday's knowledge might not be serving me well for tomorrow's problems. So I think, you know, the role of leaders, if they're dealing with instability, challenge, strategies to change their business or their organization or achieve a vision. If they're in that world, then they need to admit they don't have the answers, and they need to make it okay for their followers or their teams to also admit they don't know the answers.
Yeah.
Now, that might sound a bit countercultural in terms of how we've been conditioned. And if we look at these sort of old books, really, of leadership, it might say something different. But I think that's where we are now. And I've seen it with a few leaders who are good at doing this. They are able to admit they don't know, and to maybe even sort of facilitate or mobilize action learning. So to help, sponsor and support groups of people working together in their own action learning set or their squad, and giving them the sort of challenges that might come from the strategy to work on, rather than assuming that there's going to be an external consultant or expert who's going to tell you how to do it, and get them working on it in an action learning way. That also is challenging for those people, because they also have to let go of some of that prior conditioning that I'm supposed to be the expert, I'm supposed to be giving the answers. That's why I'm at this kind of mid to senior level. And you've got to leave that alone in order to be able to be genuinely in your problem solving. It needs a bit of patience as well. And that's another key point, which again may sound countercultural, because we're in a time when people are expecting immediate answers and solutions, and maybe the tech or the AI can tell us what that should be. Can you give us this kind of intervention in half an hour, or 3 bullet points, rather than us digging into it and exploring the problem in depth. So you sometimes have to go slow to go fast with action learning.
This is so interesting, and I'm just the point of paradox and how paradoxical complexity is. So one can say go slow to go fast, and that's been my lived experience. And also the tendency of, I think we often find, when things are tough, when things are messy, to outsource complexity. There must be an answer out there for what's happening in here. Whereas the paradox in that is actually it's an inside job. To be able to navigate complexity, you've got to insource the answers and work in the moment with the complexity, with the messiness, with the ishness of things. What are your thoughts on this, Eric? Anything to add there?
Great thoughts. I mean, just to synthesize, I think the leader who can crack that, the leader who can manage that, combine, humility with an open mind, with kind of courage, and with some sense of self and confidence in their own abilities, and the drive to take it forward, is likely to succeed organizationally and personally through transition, really, because I mean, people know these examples, but famously, Blockbuster sneering at Netflix when they tried to sell their business to them for a knockdown price because they were desperate. Kodak inventing the digital camera, but not going ahead with it. What's the others? Nokia thinking Apple were a computer company when they launched the iPhone, and we're not a threat. I mean, we're probably making on a smaller scale decisions like that right now every day, because we're seeing things the way we've always seen them. And it's quite a challenge to, paradigm shifts sound like a piece of jargon. It's quite a challenge to embrace the thought that I need my own sense of critical abilities. At the same time, I need to be mindful that I've got to apply them in maybe a different way. And I think that whole action learning, approach kind of gets us there, really. So I think, in building organizations and in building careers, I think it's, it's sort of critical, really, that, we think through things in that sort of way. And we've probably, many of us consultants around, but I think you mentioned in Britain, maybe there's some challenges with budgets and so on. Sometimes in times of tight budgets, we make very good decisions because we have to think about every investment that we make. And, maybe we're making it with people that we have because an expensive report maybe isn't so viable for us. So I think in challenging times, sometimes we can make very astute decisions driven by the circumstances, really, of the constraints, that we're working under.
Yeah, and that's been my experience on operations during times of genuine crisis. And there's research behind this, a lot of research around breakthrough thinking happening much quicker and much more effectively where there is a crisis near. So that leads me on to kind of the role of action learning in all of this. I really like the point you made around kind of the practicality of action. We both made points about the sort of how practical and pragmatic action learning is at times like this. So the next question is about what practical tools actually exist in action learning. If you're someone coming in to watch this and have a look at our live stream now, what are the tools within action learning that anyone can apply at times of instability?
Sure.
Eric, do you want to have a pop at that first?
All right, I was deferring to Richard there. There's a genius on all things ALQ, but I think, and maybe this is an obvious one, but if a challenge is both urgent and important, and we can express it in the form of a question, it's probably something worth looking at. If it passes the urgent test and the important test, it's probably something which is worth looking at, something we can get excited about, and something we can galvanize, people around. So thinking about that I think is a very useful. Richard, I'll fire across to you for the methodology, if I may. I've worked with different methodologies and with different kind of experts over the years, but
I think for me,
you go.
It's about working out what your question is, first of all. So take your problem or your challenge or your crisis and actually turn it into a question. And usually, we encourage people to do a good way of doing that is to, express it as a how can I or a how can we type question, depending on whether the action learning question is individual work that you're sharing with a learning set, or whether it's kind of a group problem, which is in the middle of the table and we're all facing it. So how can I or how can we? If you use those words, it will help you, formulate and have a discussion around what is the problem. And that may evolve and change over time, but you've got to start somewhere. This is all in the structure of the ALQ. If people are going through the Alpha program or an action learning question-based program that we're running, you have to then say, who cares, really? Is it just us sort of dreaming about something, or is there some real sort of need for, other people in my team or my organization to actually tackle this? It could be a problem like, how do we improve, ways of working? How do we motivate a demotivated workforce or team? It could be, how do we get everybody to be aware of health and safety challenges and keeping all of our people safe? So it could be as wide-ranging as those sort of examples, but work out what the question is. Then you can start to do some research around it. And the way that I do it is, it's all summed up in the knowledge mapping method, and there's articles on that, but it's certainly embedded into the stages of the action learning question process. And that means actually saying, well, on the ground, this is my problem or challenge or our problem. What's in the sky? In other words, the theories, the models, the experts, the conferences, the papers that are being published, etc. What are people saying that might be relevant to my problem on the ground? Do a bit of research up there, but then come back down to the ground to what's going on within the organization or the team. Study it, research it, find out what people really think and really feel, not just what they say when they fill in the employee satisfaction survey. And they tick boxes, and then it leads to some quantitative data. Actually get some qualitative data for real, and get people to tell you what they really think. That's difficult, but it's really important. So that's what I would call underground. So work out what's going on underground. Once you've mapped all that and you've investigated it, you've then got to do something. So you've got to take some action. You've got to be taking action all the way, actually, all the way through this. Sure. But you've done it, Shell. I mean, you did it with the action learning facilitator program. So maybe there's something you can say about your what was your experience of that process?
Yeah, and my experience was, and we actually had a good conversation about this the other day. My own experience as an ex-military person, transitioning from that world, and it was so core to my identity, being in the military, into business. So from sort of boots to business, and it was so transformed. The asset that I took was the set. My set was my asset, where I could bring genuine worries, challenges, questions, thoughts to a group that is really akin to being in a squad, being in a section in the military, where you share everything and there's innate trust. And that has been the biggest thing I've taken from it, is that actually there's a structure there where no matter what you're facing, you're going to get good insight, way beyond your own insight. And that is the biggest power, I think, of it. And there's nothing to fear in that. And you don't have to be in a time of crisis for that to be helpful. It can be an optimized thing where you've got a brain's trust almost, where there's a mutual benefit there. And we all do that for each other in managing those questions that we're all navigating. So that's been the biggest.
That's brilliant. And I think, that's a great example of, how it's worked for an individual. The other thing that happens, I believe, when you're doing this organizationally, you're actually creating, pockets or groups with that level of trust across the organization, across functions and boundaries. You're creating communities of practice, or they're kind of like your real world researchers within an organization, and a network that is different to the standard organization chart and hierarchy or organogram. So that, for me, is, if you're looking at this organizationally as a leader, is an incredible benefit.
100%. And I think, just going into the business context today, so I've been working with an organization, fascinating organization, very technical, very unashamedly technical, but facing quite a lot of strong winds in the market, and having to evolve structures, operating models. What a great way to empower teams as an asset and a resource, in that, to give them the levels of trust in groups outside of the formal boundaries to then go and drive change. And I think we've seen that happen effectively in a number of organizations we've worked with. Okay, brilliant. So that's sort of technical bits on action learning. So let's come back down to the ground and talk about the people on the call who are thinking, how can I apply action learning right now, today, to my worldview, to my life, to my business challenge? What would you say? I guess starting with Richard, and then Eric, I'm interested in your view as well. How can anyone start working with action learning right now?
Look at your inbox. Work out what are puzzles there that can be solved, and there's a solution, there's a known method for solving them, and maybe that somebody else does it, who's an expert, and solves the puzzle, or maybe you're the expert and you solve the puzzle. Forget that, if you like. That's the kind of easy bit. For action learning, you're not interested in puzzles. So go through your inbox and say, okay, what are the recurring themes here which are not getting fixed? They've been around for a while. It's a sort of too hard to do list. I knew I'd get to it at some point, but I didn't know when. Now aim to get to it and work out what the question is. And it's a multifaceted, complex question that comes from those problems that you've had in the too hard to deal with list. If you don't actually deal with them, it will come back and bite you at a later stage, individually and organizationally as well. If you keep sort of not dealing with that issue that is on our vision or it's on our strategy, but we're not dealing with it, then eventually it will come back and bite you.
So it's about, what I'm hearing from that is it's prioritizing, it's picking out what is the big issue that I can frame as a challenge or a question.
Lean into the uncomfortable stuff that you've been avoiding. Like, embrace it, go for it.
That's where the magic is. Eric, thoughts on this one?
Oh, no, that's really good. I mean, and things which you feel might be uncomfortable might be a lot of fun, actually, and pretty interesting.
Yes.
a great sense of achievement if you make 10% progress even on something that you felt very guilty because you weren't getting to. Yeah, and there's a logical approach. I think there's an intuitive one as well, isn't there, which is, can this last? You know, with the changes we're facing, you know, what's likely to come, I don't know. You know, is likely to be maybe instinctive, really, as we look at, you know, some of these transitions. And kind of going back a few years when Richard and I worked on some things, saying to Shell, quite like the Web 1.0 years. Everyone was probably at school or something, but you know, but there was great uncertainty. I was involved in transforming publishing from paper journals and things to you know, digital products. We didn't know where the income would come from. It was very hard to argue with the finance director's projections about journal growth. That you knew would do that, you know. So there is an intuitive part, isn't there? I think about this doesn't feel right. What's coming? You know, what might I be thinking about? Which can be very hard when many of our jobs, you know, where there used to be 3 people, there are 2. The workload's the same, you know, etc. I think we are seeing, you know, in industries which will go through very fundamental shifts, aren't we? So this might seem a little big for most of us, but there might be part of it which says, actually, you know, this question will help me become valuable in predicting part of that and working out part of that future, and being positioned for that head of department, or, you know, whatever it is when the reorganization comes. We might be wrong, but you know, we might be right. I think if we've got colleagues we trust and can talk to, canteen, or famously it's a water cooler, isn't it? It's normally a coffee or something, and express uncertainties and hear their uncertainties. And sometimes if you're the kind of person who works out things together with people, you know, the questions can emerge from that. Something you thought was just you feeling it, you might discover, well, actually, there's a few of us think this, and there's a number of questions we can identify together, you know, based on our interests, really, if it's that future-focused part. But some of them might be around operational efficiency and effectiveness and those things, which can make big changes over a, you know, a 5-year perspective or something like that. And you know, even with the, you know, kind of the systems we have and what we're currently using, I think we're expecting kind of lead times on our work to shrink enormously, and expectations, and, you know, in almost every aspect of our operational work, you know, operation, what would that mean? You know, in human resources, I know the world isn't all AI, but we're seeing the impact of AI on talent acquisition systems and other things. What does that mean for the quality of recruitment? Is it just about speed? Is it better, etc.? You know, in infrastructure, again, there's huge questions around, particularly with the Internet of Things and the ability to measure everything. You know, what we can do in real time for genuinely smart infrastructure that the climate challenges, etc., reduces water consumption, you know, improves sustainability, improves recycling, improves service, etc. So, yeah, I think there'll be aspects of our work where we feel a gut feel around uncertainty. And for me, I like to explore it with colleagues. Other people might figure it out themselves, but there could be some questions in that as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love the fact that you've kind of reflected on that 4.0 reality of who am I in the next wave of uncertainty, and how am I of value, which gets to the core of action learning. So I'm going to leave you with one final question. We've got like 1 minute, so we're going to have to be succinct. But I'd like you to just give me one phrase on what you think we can look forward to in 2026. What's coming, do you think, next year as we look forward? Obviously, we're closing 2025. What do you think we'll see in 2026, and maybe what are we most excited about for 2026?
I think, you know, you mentioned in Britain maybe people feel some challenges, maybe across the developed world. I think I'd have more faith and more confidence. And I'd be ready to look at the part you can play, or each of us can play, in building something kind of better, where people can thrive and have good lives, which means obviously, clean air, clean water, a good way of life, a nice community to be in, etc. So I think it would just be, I look forward to it with confidence, but be ready to play a part locally, nationally, in the organisation, with your family, etc., in pushing towards something better, which would include well-being and those things. So we'll each have parts that we want to play, but we should be ready to be active, I think, and go forward in that manner.
Brilliant. Thanks, Eric. Richard?
For me, I'm looking forward to humans getting back in the loop. So I've seen a lot of examples this year of certain professions and fields where very experienced and qualified people have been looking forward to removing humans from the loop. And there were some interesting discussions that we've had in conferences about, should we be doing that? So I think there will be a place for humans in the loop going forward. And we need to give it some really close attention and believe in the humans. And action learning is a human process that works. We've proven it over many waves of change. We always think that the current change that we're going through is the most dramatic, but there have been waves of change socially and economically and politically since action learning as a concept was developed. And we've been through a few of those, Eric, over the years. So we're in another one now. It feels like the most dramatic, but let's not lose faith in the humans.
Riffing from that, my point is around the breakdown of individualism. I think individualism, it's failed, to be honest, as a concept. Right. And I think, one of the things that brings us all together is that we believe in the collective wisdom of groups and the ability of groups and communities to make better decisions together. I'm really excited to see where we can take, our contribution to that into 2026 in groups as diverse as, going out into the Middle East and hopefully being part of a collective cross barrier, cross boundary group there with things like Orbit, Eric, with Sarah. And also back here, close to home, in our own groups and communities of practice, we're about to go and meet, building that community of interest and just being greater than the sum of our parts. And then finally, for me as a veteran and an ex-military person, going back into that world and hopefully adding value to others like me who've made those transitions and doing that, with and through others. That feels really quite a compelling 2026 for me. I'm conscious of time. We're slightly over. I hope people are still with us. And for those of you who are joining this afterwards, I hope you really enjoy it. And I think it just leaves us to say, have an amazing break. And, it's been a pleasure to join you both here tonight.
Thanks very much, Shell. And thanks, Eric, as well. Great to see you back in the loop with us.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Shell. And happy Christmas, everyone, and a prosperous new year.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, thanks a lot. See you soon. To the bar, bye-bye. I think. Bye.